Welcome back to Common Ground, an inside look at Suffolk County. I'm your host, Sheriff Steve Tompkins. Now on this side of the program, we're honored to have our mayor, Martin J. Walsh, sitting in with us to talk about the campaign, but equally as important, to talk about the things, the issues that are very important to you and how he and his administration are addressing those issues. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sheriff. Thanks for having me today.
So, listen. Okay, so you were in State House for 17 years.
Yes.
And so you had to run every 2 years or thereabouts. So was that 6, 7 races, and then you ran for mayor.
Yes.
And now you're running again.
Yes.
Any difference when you talk about that type of civic engagement, running for this office versus your prior offices?
Oh yeah, you know, this is my third completely different campaign. When I ran for state representative, it was the first time, and I had a couple challenges. You were talking about the issues and talking about what you can do as a legislator. When I ran for mayor 4 years ago, a lot different because the record doesn't transfer over to the mayor's office. You can talk about what you've done as a state representative of the legislature, but it doesn't necessarily transfer over. More of the constituent services do. And so when we had that race, there was 12 of us went down to myself and John Conley. I was fortunate enough to win, and then you govern. And it's a completely different job. This race now, from compared to 4 years ago, is a lot different as well. Even though in the primary we had four people running, 4 of us all together. Some candidates working harder than others, some weren't working at all. Right. But it's a different dynamic. And again, now I'm running with a record. So you know, I personally think the record is good. Yeah. But you know, there are things that aren't great. Yeah. And you have to defend them. Yeah. And people focus on the negative. They don't necessarily go towards the positive. Yeah. So as we're working out there talking about what the good things we've done in the city over the last 3.5 years, we also have to come up with an understanding of why didn't certain things happen.
Well, you know what? That's the interesting thing about a second term. Yeah. Is that, and you tell me, you correct me, so you have that first term 4 years. Yeah. And it's almost kind of, although you know the job, it's really kind of like on-the-job training. Oh, absolutely. You know, to really get your arms around all that comes with running a city like, I mean, this is not, you know, Mayberry. Yeah. This is a real big city with a lot of parts.
18,000 people working for you, $3 billion budget. You know, you're running a police department of 2,100. You're running a school department of nearly 8,000, 9,000 people. You're running a fire department of 1,500. So you're talking about major departments. Some of those departments are as big as cities and towns around Massachusetts. And you know, the first year, the first few months was like, oh my God, you know, one of those oh my God moments every day.
Somebody told me a story about you that I think it was after the like 6th or 7th week. You went home and said, what the heck did I get myself into?
Yeah, and I couldn't talk to anyone because everyone was helping me and supporting me. So I should have called. I couldn't call anybody. I'm like, who am I going to call? Right. But you know, it does take it takes a while to get your feet under you. Yeah. You know, because everything's different. The schedule's different. Even though I had a busy schedule before that, your schedule's different. Yeah. The demand on your time is different. The press is completely different. And even now, I think more so than even say Mayor Menino before me, Twitter was around under Mayor Menino. Yeah. But the news wasn't as intense. Right now it's intense. Everybody wants to break the story. So you have your local papers, you have the Boston Globe, Boston Herald, you have the local papers in the neighborhoods, and then you have the Post and the Times, and everyone else wants to do it. And then you have the TV station want to do it, you have CNN wants to do it. So there's so much demand on what's going on out there because, you know, the attention span of Americans now is very small.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, well, let's get on to the next thing.
So talk to us about the issues that you're really championing. You know, people on the other side of the camera really want to hear about what you're doing with education and affordable housing and DACA and that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And there's one other thing, the economy. Those are kind of the big issues, hot issues in the city. So let me just jump on it one at a time. On the housing issue, we have 23,000 units of housing in this. We launched the housing plan October of 2014 to create 53,000 units of new housing. This is housing in all different realms.
All throughout Boston?
All throughout Boston in all different economic scales.
Okay.
As of right now, we have 23,000 units of housing either complete, being constructed, or in the pipeline. Of that, 9,000 units either low income or workforce housing. What does that mean? Everyone says anyone who earns between $0 and say $120,000 for a family in that realm. Okay. So those units are important to build because those are the units that stabilize the rent.
That's right.
The problem is we've built so much housing units but we also have 30,000 new people in Boston in the last 3 years. So as quickly as we're building housing, as quickly as we're trying to get ahead of it, more and more people want to move into the city of Boston. Okay. So our goal for the next 4 years is to take advantage of the Community Preservation Act, to make sure we put more money into low-income housing, continue to take money from the inclusionary development and put it into housing, and continue to use city and state-owned property, try and get the state to do more of it, to use those land to be able to build more housing. We're building more first-time home buyers homes than any other period. We're doing this, but we got to do more of it.
Okay.
So that's our housing plan. And we also got to look at, we're trying to create more housing for college universities to go 100% on campus, so that that frees up housing stock in neighborhoods.
Big time.
Because what's happening is, in neighborhoods where kids live, it jacks up the price of the rent, and everyone's saying, well, if I can get, if I'm getting 600,000 now and they're getting 4,000, I want the 4,000.
That's right.
So we got to do more of that. The second piece is around education. The educational system, and when you look at Boston, we have more kids right now learning in level 1 and level 2 schools. And in the last 3.5 years, when I took over as mayor, we had a situation where we had one of the shortest school days in the country. We no longer have that.
Good.
We've made a commitment to have universal pre-kindergarten. We're working on it now. I need some help from the legislature to take money from the Convention Center Fund of taxes that's raised in Boston. If that $16 million came back to the city, we could have universal pre-K in Boston. In saying that, we've increased our seats by about 25% over 3 years, so we have more kids learning in that. We're looking at now, we're making $1 billion investment in our buildings in Boston.
In the school buildings?
In the school buildings.
And a lot of those buildings they've been here since the beginning of time.
Before World War II.
Okay.
And some of it's pretty sad, some of the buildings we're in, that our kids are learning not in the 21st century.
What does it cost to build a new school?
Depends on what it is. We're talking probably 150 million to 250, depending on what it is. If you want everything in it that's important for a kid, we're going to do a lot of renovations, and we're going to leverage that money, the $1 billion plus money matched from the state. So we are going to leverage all of that to try and build as many as possible and put us on a pathway. We've made historic investments in BPS. I mean, I'm being criticized for defunding Boston Public Schools. I'm not. The way that the schools work is, if you have enrollment in your class and your enrollment goes down, the revenue to your school goes down because the kids aren't there. And if you have enrollment that goes up in Boston Public Schools, your money goes up because you have more kids going into your school. And we're working on how do we deal with level 3 schools and that fall in that category, that lose kids. How do we backfill that?
Well, let me ask you this. The conversation between charter and public, where do you stand on that?
I mean, I don't think we should be having battles over it. I think the fight happened 2 years ago with question 2. It's over now. We should support our charter schools. We should support our public schools. It's time to move on. It's time to just focus on education. We spend so much time in Boston and in urban areas across America fighting over education, and the ones who are losing it is the kids. So what we really have to do is continue to increase the ability to put our kids on pathways to success. And I would argue that in the last 3 years we've done that. We still have work to do. We have work to do in our high school space, and we're going to continue to do that. On DACA, you mentioned DACA. On the whole immigrant issue, I mean, I get myself in trouble a little bit in this, but we have 680,000 people that live in Boston. 28% of those folks were born in another country. 48% of those folks are first generation like me. We're a city of immigrants, whether people want to admit it or not.
That's right.
And we have a lot of great things.
We're a country of immigrants.
We're a country of immigrants.
Right?
We have a lot of great things going on. On the DACA piece, the scary thing there is that we have, 810,000 DACA people in our country. DACA is, for people that don't understand, it's protections given by the government. Basically, they were brought here by their parents, and their parents are here, they're undocumented, and these kids were brought here. But of the 800,000, I think it's 95% of them are either working in school or in the service. So you think about that number for a minute.
Right.
And if we lose that from that group of people from our workforce, that's a lot of people.
Well, not only that, you're sending these folks back to countries that they don't know.
They don't know.
Okay, I mean, they may be, by heritage Honduran or Mexican, but if they've never lived there, they don't have friends or family there. What do? You just drop them there and say good luck?
Not only that, but when you look, when the president came down with executive order on sanctuary cities, and he came down with this thing on Muslim bans, I mean, I brought in 3 groups of people into my office. The first one was the universities and colleges, that a lot of kids come from other countries to the United States to study. Most of those kids learn what a democracy is, and they go back to their country and try and institute a democracy. So that's one area. The second area, I brought in the college presidents. I mean, the hospital heads. And the hospital heads were concerned because many of the students that were in the hospitals learning here are foreign students that were learning here, that were actually staying here and treating people here and finding the cures for diseases here. So they were concerned about, how do we just chop off this part of the world and not let this brain power in here? And the last part was the tech companies. And this is a telling sign, because we were talking, so many tech companies have Boston as their base, and they pay real estate tax and they pay income tax, which keeps our economy moving. And they said, well, if we can't operate here in the United States of America. What we'll do is we'll keep our company in Boston as the headquarters, but we'll move our employees to Canada. Yeah. And you can't have that. Yeah. I mean, what we got to do is produce jobs and produce an economy that works. And so I get concerned about the whole immigrant issue. And the last thing is economic development. I mean, I'm not sure if Amazon's going to come to Boston, but if Amazon comes to Boston, that's 50,000 jobs of all different educational levels, which means all different income levels. And you know, having any city that gets Amazon, I mean, think about that for a minute. 50,000 jobs. That's an incredible opportunity.
Yeah. I want to ask you about community preservation insofar as communities staying intact and staying together and what that means when you have generations that have lived in the same locale, but for whatever reason, either economic or housing or education, they have to disperse. But before I go there, I just want to go back to housing. Can you just touch on housing for the homeless and housing for veterans?
Yes. Okay. So in 2015, Michelle Obama challenged cities around America to end chronic veterans homelessness. So we accepted the challenge. We weren't quite sure how we were going to do it, but we accepted the challenge. And we brought in a lot of nonprofits and providers and said, okay, how do we do this? Let's identify how many folks we have. So at the time, at the beginning of 2015, we identified, I think, around 515 chronically homeless folks in the streets of Boston. By the end of that year, we had housed 565 chronically homeless people, veterans. Okay. So we ended chronic veterans homelessness in the city. Okay. From that day till today, we've housed 800 chronically homeless veterans. And to the point where if you're a homeless veteran and you're on the street, if you want a home, we're going to get you into a home. You go down to the New England Home for Veterans and you sign up and you go in there, we'll work on a home. But some people choose to be on the street. On top of that, we created what came out of this was a thing called a housing surge, where we've housed 1,100 chronically homeless people, including the 800 veterans, in our streets since 2015. So we're talking 1,100 fewer people on the streets. Now, people are still saying there's homeless folks in the street. There are. Yeah. A lot of them are coming from other places. Yeah. And what we're asking the state to do is help us in creating opportunities for shelter in different communities. Boston shouldn't bear the brunt of it all. Now, we're not going to turn people away, but we need some help when it comes to homelessness, as far as most of the people, when you talk to them, don't come from our city. And then we have the drug addiction on top of it that's getting mixed in. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of getting mixed in. It's kind of like, you know, people are saying every homeless person is a drug addict. It's not the case. No, it's not. And not every drug addict's a homeless person. Right. So I think it's how do we work on those two issues. So those are two issues that we've been working on, and we have a good system in place for our veterans, thank God, and for our homeless folks. We're working on trying to create more opportunities for housing, and that's also low-income housing, where some of these developments that we're doing, we're actually setting units aside for homeless people. And the way it works is we'll take a homeless person into what's called a housing surge. It'll be half a day long programming. They'll get health care, they'll get benefits, they'll see what they own, see what they have as far as benefits. By the end of it, they get off an apartment.
So, you know, one of the things when I'm up at the State House and I talk to legislators about a lot is the need for more substance abuse and mental health beds outside of a correction facility. Now, clearly, in the absence of that, a guy does something wrong, maybe feed himself or feed his habit, he gets in trouble, they send him to jail. I don't think that's necessarily where not necessarily, they don't need to be there. No. They need to be in a facility that is built to address their issues. Have you had any conversations with either the governor or legislators about the need for more of those beds?
When I was a rep, I spent a lot of time fighting for those beds, and I think that, you know, I'd love to see more, even private detoxes come to Boston. You know, we have ones on the Cape, Gosnell, and some other folks, Spectrum out in Worcester. I'd love to see some more public detoxes, but also private detoxes that can help us. I think there's a couple things. I think we have to get the insurance companies to pay for longer stays. I mean, if somebody's coming down from heroin, 5 days isn't going to do it. Not even close. 5 days might do it for alcohol. Yeah. But you probably need to get 10 days in there for alcohol. For heroin, you need probably a 14-day program, and then after treatment. So I think we have to continue to put money into treatment, if we want to get ahead of this epidemic, it's pretty tough. And we also have to think about how do we do more, more prevention. And for people listening today, if you have a son or daughter that you're worried about, talk about drugs, talk about alcohol, talk about needles, talk about heroin. Don't think your son is immune to it or daughter's immune to it. And if you have a problem with a son or daughter who has a problem, what we did in the city of Boston was we created a 311 line. So if you have somebody tonight you're struggling, you don't know what to do, just pick up the phone, call 311. We will hook you up with a counselor that can walk you through it.
You also created an Office of Recovery.
Yes, we did.
Talk to us about that.
Our Office of Recovery Services is over at the Department of Public Health, and we have we're working to better coordinate the services of recovery programs. We never had that in the city, first in the nation actually. And we have what's called the PATS program that does some treatment work over in Amelia Cass Boulevard. For people walking up the street, we have the public detox that we're working with as well. And we're trying to get our Office of Recovery Service to better coordinate services. Your office is part of it.
Yes, we are.
We do some work on it. I mean, like you said, I would probably say 75, 80% of the folks that are in your facility are there because of alcohol or drugs.
That's right.
Or both.
That's right.
If they had took the drugs or alcohol out of their system, they're not making the mistake. The same can be said if kids dropping out of school, they're getting high or they're drinking, family members just having complete chaos in the home. It's no one's immune to it. And I think that our recovery service office is trying to do more. And we also have our police and fire doing follow-up care. Our fire department is going around now. And if somebody has an overdose in Boston, a couple weeks later, the fire department will do a visit to that home to see how people are doing. Yeah, we just started the faith program. So, and the police are doing it as well. So we're doing some good things in the city.
Now, you spoke about my department. You also have an Office of Returning Citizens.
Just started, yeah.
Or loosely put, folks that are transitioning out of an incarceration facility, going back to one of the neighborhoods in the city of Boston. Talk to us about that. Why did you start that? What's that
Yeah, I
about?
mean, that came from conversation with you. I mean, this office it's housed in the city, but there's really no lines there between the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office and the city of Boston, and working on a lot of people come back from prison and they don't know what to do, and some come back, when they come out of your facility, they're a little more in tune to what options are. Right. They come back from federal time or state time, they have no idea, and I hear it all the time. And I think it's really about how do we get people back on their feet, and how do we provide them with the services, whether it's try and get them employment or get them their GED. Again, somebody goes into Suffolk County House of Correction, more often than not, they're going to come out better than they went in, because you have so many programs that you can help them on the right track. Right. They go to state or federal time, they're not getting that. So we're going to try and help them, put them back on track, keep track of people who are coming back, because a lot of the crime we see in the street is repeat offenders, and some of these guys have gone away for a long time. We had a shooting a few weeks ago that a guy was away for I think 10 years. He came back and he got shot because he knew nothing else. Yeah. And if you only know one thing, then you're going to go to that one thing. And so we have to. Our Office of Returning Citizens is going to try and help people and give people better pathways.
Well, what we're doing, we're also working with the Department of Corrections.
Yeah.
So for those guys and ladies that have been away for 10, 15, 20 years, before they leave, they're stepped down to one of the county sheriffs.
Which is good.
And, yeah, it is, because we have them for anywhere from 3 to 12 months, and we can introduce them to a lot of the social service agencies that they don't know about, that they don't know exist. Let me ask you about...
And that makes a big... Just for the person listening or watching TV, maybe in West Roxbury or in Jamaica Plain or Rosendale, you might say, well, this doesn't affect me. It absolutely does affect you.
It does.
Because you're paying taxes to have them go through the court system. You're paying taxes to have them go through the detox system or whatever, unemployment system, whatever it might be, housing system. This is a real opportunity for us to actually turn the tide in a lot of ways. So this affects every resident in the city of Boston if we can get these programs right.
Exactly. I want to ask you about pay equity. Yeah. Where do you come down? Well, first of all, where do you come down on the $15 an hour wage?
Supportive of it.
Okay. Talk to us about pay equity. Look, I'm not sure that I fully understand if a male and a female have the same qualifications, doing the same job. I'm not sure I understand why there's a difference in the salary that they receive.
Because it's been that way forever. Because it's been
crazy.
A male-dominated world.
But it's crazy.
One thing we did with our Office of Women Advancement is start to look at companies and working with companies who've given us information. I think we're up to 215 companies now that have given us anonymous information on what men get paid, what women get paid in their companies for doing the similar job. And we saw major disparities there. And we're starting to see some changes in that. We created what's called a free salary negotiation workshop, which is helping women negotiate their own salary. We've had about 5,000 women gone through that already. We're seeing some benefits of that. Yeah. And it's studies showing that a man gets a job, they'll go in and ask for higher money, and generally get it. A woman gets a job, they won't ask for any money, they'll take what's offered. So we're trying to help folks on negotiating their own salary. Yeah. We're also working with the Women's Workforce Council to bring more awareness to this. And it's 2017.
Right.
I mean, we shouldn't be talking about pay equity anymore. I mean, we should be talking about equal pay. And in Boston, the majority of the heads of households are led by women.
Right.
So it's an economic impact as well. If a woman gets paid more, they're going to be able to spend more money on their family and spend more money in the economy. So it's a big economic impact as well in the Commonwealth, but in the city of Boston.
There's empirical data that speaks to the fact that women at home, whether they're single, parent in the household, or single person in the household, or family, if they're making the same amount of money, you're bringing more money into that household
Absolutely.
that allows them to do more things, which is really, really cool. Now, I've talked to several people about you and your time as mayor. And one of the things that I've said, and I'm not blowing smoke here, is that although the first couple of months probably was just kind of crazy, you rose to the occasion. You were able to really get your arms around, how you run a big city like Boston. In any city, in any municipality, you're going to have a hiccup here or a hiccup there. Was your time in the State House very instrumental to, and I know the jobs are somewhat different, but your seeming ease with taking on the mayor's office, or was this just, one day at a time, I'm learning this job, and that has made me what I am?
A little bit of both. I mean, certainly the challenges are day at a time, and you can't, as you're working through different challenges, in my administration, the first term I've had challenges, you get through them, and you take a step at a time and a day at a time, and eventually you come out. You're okay with it. A lot of it has been work at the State House because I got involved in the issues that are important. I mean, whether it's housing or substance abuse or immigrant issues, those issues I was very involved with the State House, and I understood those issues had a lot of impact in Boston. And I also worked hard. I mean, I represent a district as a state rep that expects you to be there, expects you to be out in the district. I mean, before me it was Jim Brett, and he was everywhere. And so when I became state representative, I had to be everywhere because he was everywhere. And
the same thing followed Menino.
And the same thing followed Menino. He was everywhere, so I got to be everywhere. And I don't mind it. I love working hard, and I think that it did prepare me. And plus, the relationships helps. I mean, there's been times at the State House I've been able to use those relationships to help us with different things, whether it was budget or not. And sometimes those relationships didn't help. But you have colleagues up there, and I think it's important. The one thing I think that they gave me a little different perspective is more so than the past any mayors in Boston is thinking more regionally. In the past, the mayor of Boston focused on Boston solely. Obviously I'm focused on Boston, but you also got to look at Greater Boston because what happens in Greater Boston affects what happens in Boston. Right. So it goes into your district. You got to talk to Chelsea. You got to talk to Winthrop. Right. You got to talk to Revere. You got to talk to on the other side Quincy and Milton and places like that because it is a regionalization. And when you think of Boston, I mean, we're a mid-sized city in America. We're going to be at 700,000 people probably in about, I'd say, 2 or 3 years. Compared to like Chicago's 2.1 million. You look at Greater Boston, now we're at 2.5 million. Wow. So it changes the dynamic.
Now you are.
Yeah, Greater Boston. So it changes the dynamics when you start thinking about it. So, that's the one area, having relationships outside of Boston, which was key as a mayor of the city. And I think that, to be successful, we do have to think regionally. We have to think like, hypothetically, Amazon comes into Boston, let's say. That's 50,000 people. Where are they going to live? Yeah, right. They all can't live in Boston. Right. So it's a regional approach.
Gotcha.
And I think that's how we have to start looking at it. A biotech cluster. We talked about the Red Line corridor. On the Red Line, you have, Braintree and Quincy on one side of us. On the other side, Cambridge and Somerville. We work together, and we threw Chelsea in there. We work together called the Red Line corridor to try and bring biotech and life sciences into our area. If somebody goes to Braintree and we become a cluster, well, that cluster will eventually spill into Boston. So it's important to think that way.
How do we deal with this partisan divide that's happening in D.C.? Not so much here, but down there. It's crazy. People don't want to cross the aisle and really get the work done.
It's sad. I mean, just watching what happened in Vegas and listening to the response now. I mean, I was asked a question by a reporter yesterday. They said, what do you think about, gun control? And I said, until President Trump and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan get serious on it, it's not going to happen. You had a Republican congressman shot.
Right.
And the very first thing out of one of the people in the field's mouth was, "Oh, we don't need gun reform." I'm not even talking about taking people's guns away. Right. You can have guns.
That's right.
But this guy had 40 plus, maybe even more than that, guns. He had at least 700 rounds of ammunition. What are you hunting?
Exactly.
What are you hunting with 700 rounds of ammunition?
Unfortunately, people.
And I think that, I think it's sad. I mean, you look at urban America. In Boston, we're at 40 homicides this year. We're up over this time last year. Last year, the months of October and November were high in homicides. So depending on what happens in October and November this year, we might be where we were last year. Yeah. Our average homicide in Boston for the last 5 years is about 50. Okay, in saying that, we've had 40 homicides in Boston this year. Yeah. We had 59 people to this point killed in Vegas. We're not that far off of what happened in Las Vegas, except that individual guns in our streets by our kids that get access to these guns. And really what we need gun reform, gun legislation that doesn't at least have responsible gun owners have to track their guns, so when they end up on the streets of Boston in a 15-year-old kid's hand, we know what happened to that gun, how did it end up there. It's too easy for access to guns. I'm not even saying take guns away at this point. I'm just saying register your gun, know where your gun is. If you sell your gun, like a car, transfer the gun and the paperwork to the person. So if that gun ends up in Boston and some young person kills another young person, I just want to know how it got there.
Funny you should say that, because I have to register my car, I have to register my dog. Absolutely. Why wouldn't you register your gun? It's crazy.
People find the NRA is not even letting the National Center for Disease Control to even do research on this, which is this is just not right.
It's crazy.
And people, innocent people, getting killed every day in America, and it's just sad. I mean, and again, what happened to Vegas is horrible. I mean, and then what happened with the natural disasters? I mean, we had disasters in Puerto Rico, in Florida, in Houston, in the Caribbean. In Mexico, it's just been a tough 3 weeks.
It has. I'm saying once the locusts show up, it's a wrap. We're in trouble, right?
Time to go.
Mr. Mayor, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it today.
Thanks, man.
Much luck.
Thank you,
Not that you need it, but much luck, in going forward and just running the city. And they tell me that being mayor is the best job in America. I've heard that several times.
It is the best job in America.
Yeah, well, you're doing a good job at it.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay. That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We're out of here. We'll be back again next week. So until then, please do take care of yourself. We'll see you soon.